"You have 30 days to move out of your own house," my brother said, "or we're calling a lawyer." He didn't say hello either. He just walked into my kitchen, poured himself a coffee like he lived there, and slid a piece of paper across my counter. It was a printed email from a paralegal. My name was in the subject line. "Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I genuinely want to know who's in this community." I didn't cry. I didn't throw the coffee at him. I picked up the paper and read it the way I read everything at work, looking for the sentence that doesn't belong. My brother's name is Owen. He is 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the one my parents described as sensitive. Sensitive was the word my mother used when she meant handle carefully, don't upset him, absorb whatever he needs. When he dropped out of his second year of university, he was going through something. When he lost 3 jobs in 5 years, the economy was brutal. When he borrowed $20,000 from my parents and never paid it back, they called it a gift they never told me about until much later. I am 31 years old. I work as a licensed insolvency trustee in Winnipeg. I spend my days sorting through financial wreckage, bankruptcies, proposals, people who borrowed against things they didn't own. I know exactly what desperation looks like when it's been wandered through paperwork. The house my brother wanted me out of was mine. I bought it 4 years ago with my own down payment, my own mortgage through RBC, my name alone on the title at the land titles office. My parents had never contributed a dollar to it. What they had done, I would find out, was tell Owen that because I bought the house in the neighborhood where we grew up, 3 blocks from where our grandmother used to live, I had some kind of moral obligation to share the equity with the family. He had apparently been building this case for 2 years. The paper he slid across my counter was a letter from a paralegal claiming that I had made a verbal agreement with my parents at a family dinner in the spring of 2021 to hold the property in trust for the family unit, and that I was now in breach of that agreement. It asked me to either pay out 50% of the current appraised value, which they had helpfully estimated at $480,000, meaning they wanted $240,000, or vacate the property within 30 days so that it could be redistributed. I set the paper down. I looked at my brother. He was watching me with the careful expression of someone who had rehearsed for a reaction and wasn't sure which one he was about to get. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "It doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that Mom and Dad need the money. The clinic bills from Dad's knee surgeries, the Owen," I said. "Where did you get this?" He told me the paralegal was a friend of his, not a lawyer, a paralegal who worked at a personal injury firm and had agreed to draft the letter as a favor. I looked at the letter again. I noticed the firm's name wasn't on the letterhead. There was no Law Society registration number. There was no articling lawyer's signature. There was just a name, a fake official font, and my address. "Okay," I said. His shoulders dropped slightly with relief. "I'll need to think about it," I said. What I did not say was, "I've been thinking about it for 11 days already." It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was a Saturday morning in early October, and the number showed up as my parents' landline, which they still have because my father distrusts his cell phone. My mother was crying before I said hello. She said Owen was in serious trouble. She said he owed money to people, she wouldn't say who, and that his landlord had given him 60 days' notice because he was 4 months behind on rent. She said they had already emptied their TFSA to help him, and it wasn't enough. She said the only asset left was my house. The only asset left was my house. I stayed very calm on the phone. I said I understood. I said I understood. I said I would think about what I could do. I said I loved her and I would call her back. Then I sat at my kitchen table for about 20 minutes, doing nothing. Then I opened my laptop. I want to be clear about something. The reason I didn't explode on that phone call, the reason I didn't drive to my parents' house and demand answers, is not because I'm especially patient. It's because when you work in insolvency, you develop a reflex. You stop reacting to the first version of a story. The first version is always the one designed to make you feel something. The second version, the one you find when you start pulling on threads, is where the actual information lives. So I started pulling. My brother's financial situation, it turned out, was not a recent emergency. It was a structure. He'd been taking small amounts from my parents for at least 6 years, amounts small enough to avoid awkward conversations, frequent enough to add up to something significant. The TFSA my mother mentioned wasn't emptied last month. It had been drawn down incrementally since 2019. I found this out because my father, who does not understand how email privacy settings work, had forwarded me a bank statement once by accident 2 years ago, meant for my mother, and I had filed it away without thinking much about it. When I found it again that Saturday morning and actually read it, I counted 9 separate e-transfers to Owen in a single calendar year. None of them were labeled. That was thread 1. Thread 2 was the verbal agreement. I thought back to every dinner, every gathering, every conversation I'd had with my parents since I bought the house. I could not find a single memory of agreeing to hold it in trust for anyone. But I also know that memory is contested terrain in families. What I did have was a text chain. Because I'm meticulous about this, I keep records of things, where my mother had congratulated me on my purchase, called it your investment, and asked me to text her the address so she could mail me a housewarming card. That text was timestamped 4 days after the supposed verbal agreement was made. Thread 3 took me longer. Owen's rent situation. His landlord had given him notice for non-payment, that much was true. But the amount owing wasn't what I expected. When I looked at average rents for the neighborhood he lives in, I knew the building. I'd helped him find it 3 years ago, and cross-referenced with the 60-day notice timeline, the arrears worked out to somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. Not a catastrophic number. Not a, we need to liquidate my sister's house number. So I asked myself, where was the rest of the pressure coming from? The answer came 9 days later, from Owen himself. He didn't mean to tell me. He called to see if I'd made a decision, and when I asked him calmly to walk me through everything, just so I could understand it, I said he talked for 45 minutes and buried the real information in the middle, the way people always do. He had co-signed a private loan 18 months ago, not a bank loan, a private lender. The interest rate was listed in the agreement as 22% annually, but there was a clause, he read it to me haltingly, clearly not fully understanding it, that allowed the lender to call the full balance on 30 days' notice if Owen missed 2 consecutive payments. He had missed 2 consecutive payments. The full balance they were now calling was $63,000. $63,000 owed to a private lender. That was the actual emergency. My parents didn't know the details. Owen had told them it was investment debt, and they had not asked follow-up questions, because that is how my family handles Owen. You accept the summary, you don't request the footnotes. I did not tell Owen what I was thinking. I said I would call him back. I made a note in my phone. Then I called a colleague who specializes in consumer proposals and asked her a few professional questions in general terms about private lending and co-signed debt. She told me what I mostly already knew but wanted confirmed. Then I called my own lawyer. And then, 11 days after my mother first called me, my brother showed up in my kitchen with a letter from a fake letterhead and told me I had 30 days. I said I would think about it. He finished his coffee and left. The Sunday lunch my parents had scheduled was 2 weeks later. My mother made roast chicken, which is what she makes when she needs something to feel normal. The table was set with the good dishes. My father was wearing his Remembrance Day sweater, even though it was November 6th. Owen was already there when I arrived, sitting in his usual chair, scrolling his phone. Everything was designed to feel like a family dinner. The kind you remember, the kind you are reluctant to ruin. I sat down. I accepted the chicken. I let my mother pour me water, and I waited. My father spoke first. He's not a cruel man. I want to be accurate about that. He is a man who loves Owen more than he understands Owen, and that gap between love and understanding is where a lot of damage gets done in families. He said that they had been thinking. He said that family takes care of family. He said that the situation with Owen was serious and that he needed my help. My mother added that she and my father had already sacrificed so much, her word, sacrificed, and that they couldn't watch Owen lose everything when I had the means to help. I looked at Owen. He was looking at the table. I said, "Tell me what you need." My father laid it out. They wanted me to refinance, take out a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, through TD or Scotiabank, whichever I preferred, and advance Owen $60,000 to clear his private debt. In exchange, Owen would sign a promissory note payable to me, and when he got back on his feet, he'd repay me directly. The house would remain in my name. It was presented as reasonable, logical, the responsible thing a sister does. I nodded slowly. And the verbal agreement, I said? The letter from Owen's paralegal friend? My father looked briefly at Owen. That was just a starting point, he said. A way to begin the conversation. A way to begin the conversation. Okay, I said. Before I decide anything, I need to understand the full picture. I looked at Owen. Tell me about the loan, the private one, walk me through it. Owen started talking. He gave me the same summary he'd given my parents. The investment gone wrong, the market conditions, the lender who was being unreasonable. He was careful and rehearsed. My mother was watching him with the expression she has always worn when Owen speaks in difficult circumstances, focused, protective, ready to defend. I let him finish. That's interesting, I said, because when you called me 2 weeks ago, you read me the clause, the one about consecutive missed payments. So you knew this was coming for at least 6 weeks before it was called. Owen's jaw shifted. And the lender, I said, he's not being unreasonable. He's executing a contract you signed. Megan, my mother said, my name in her mouth like a warning. I'm not attacking him, I said. I'm just establishing what actually happened. Because if I'm going to put my home on the line, I need to know what I'm actually dealing with. My father's voice hardened. You're dealing with your family. I know, I said. That's what concerns me. I reached into my bag. I placed 3 documents on the table, face down, next to the gravy. I also need you to know, I said, that a HELOC isn't actually an option right now, because I refinanced in September. I flipped the first document over. It was a mortgage statement. My current loan-to-value ratio doesn't support a new line of credit until the balance comes down further. Any lender I approached would turn me down. My mother blinked. My father was very still. But more importantly, I said, I need to show you something I found. I flipped over the second document. It was a printout from the FCAC, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, and attached to it were 2 pages I had prepared from my own notes, a summary of the 9 e-transfers I had documented from my parents to Owen over a single year, cross-referenced with the approximate dates of 3 separate conversations my parents had told me, in passing, that they had helped Owen, each time describing the help as small, one time manageable. The total I had documented from a single year alone was close to $26,000. The silence was the kind you hear in an office when someone realizes a number doesn't reconcile. I'm not showing you this to embarrass anyone, I said. I'm showing you because I need you to see what the actual pattern is. This isn't a crisis. This is a system. And I've been the planned exit from that system for a while now. Owen pushed back from the table slightly. That's not fair. The letter from your paralegal friend, I said, the one claiming a verbal agreement. Do you know what that can be construed as in Ontario? Depending on how it was drafted and what the intent was, it could fall under criminal harassment provisions, or at minimum, it creates significant civil exposure for the paralegal who drafted it. I had a lawyer look at it. I flipped over the third document. It was a single page, a brief written opinion from my lawyer, addressed to me, summarizing the letter's legal vulnerabilities and noting that any claim based on an unsubstantiated verbal agreement combined with the demand to vacate would face significant challenges in an Ontario court. My father's face had gone through several colors during this. He landed on something controlled and cold. You came here prepared, he said. It wasn't a compliment. I came here as your daughter, I said. I've been here as your daughter my entire life. I came prepared because the last time I was just your daughter in this house, I left with a letter telling me I had 30 days to get out of my own home. My mother made a sound, not quite a word. She was looking at Owen. Owen was looking at the documents. My father stood up. He wasn't yelling. He was past yelling, into something quieter and more deliberate. He said that I was choosing money over family. He said that what I was doing, documenting, recording, preparing, was a betrayal of everything they had raised me to be. He said that Owen needed me, and that someday I would need someone, and I would remember this moment. I hope you're right, I said. I hope someday I need something and someone who loves me actually helps me instead of building a case file to leverage my assets. I genuinely hope that. He walked to the kitchen doorway and stopped. He turned back. If you walk out of this house today without agreeing to help, he said, we are done. All of us. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood. I had understood since October. Then I need to tell you one more thing, I said. I reached into my bag again. This time I took out my phone and set it on the table. Screen up. The voice memo had been running since I put my bag down when I arrived. Everything said at this table in the last 40 minutes is recorded, I said, including the demand to vacate, which Owen delivered in my home. Including the framing of the original letter. Including this conversation. My father stared at the phone. In Ontario, I said, one-party consent applies. I was a party to this conversation. The recording is legal. He didn't lunge for the phone. He isn't that kind of man. What he did was sit back down very slowly, and for the first time in my memory, he looked old. My mother had started crying. Not the strategic tears I had seen her use in family arguments before, the ones deployed to redirect blame. These looked real. I think somewhere inside her, something had finally cracked through. Owen hadn't moved. I picked up my phone. I picked up the 3 documents. I put them in my bag. I stood up. I'm not going to the police, I said. I'm not filing a complaint against the paralegal. I'm not suing anyone. What I am going to do is nothing. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to live in my house, and I'm going to let Owen handle his own debt the way adults handle their debts, through a consumer proposal, probably, which his income would actually support if he talked to the right person. I looked at Owen. You should call a licensed insolvency trustee, I said. Not me, someone at arm's length. Most initial consultations are free. The process is more manageable than people think. I pushed my chair in. I love you, I said. All of you, I said. All of you. That's not in question. But love is not the same thing as liability. And I've spent a long time letting this family treat it like it was. I walked out. Not dramatically. Not with a slammed door. The November air outside was sharp and smelled like someone's fireplace 2 streets over. I sat in my car for about 5 minutes before I started it. Not because I was upset, but because I wanted to make sure I was actually done before I drove. I was done. I sent a message to my lawyer that night. Just a quick note to confirm I had the recording backed up in 2 places, as she had advised, and that I didn't anticipate needing it but wanted it documented. She replied the next morning with a single line, "Good." Owen filed a consumer proposal 6 weeks later. I know because the LTO system sometimes flags related addresses, and the proposal administrator happened to be a former colleague who mentioned it to me at an industry lunch without knowing the family connection. Owen's creditors, including the private lender, agreed to a settlement at 38 cents on the dollar. He kept his car. He kept his apartment. He's paying it off over 5 years. My parents did not speak to me for 4 months. Then my mother called. She had a new hip referral scheduled in Thunder Bay and needed someone to drive her to the appointment. She called me because, she said, she didn't know who else to ask. She didn't apologize. She didn't reference the Sunday lunch. She just asked. I drove her. We didn't talk about it on the way there. We talked about the drive and the weather north of the city and a documentary she had watched about the Franklin expedition. On the way back, when it was dark and she was tired from the procedure, she said quietly, "I know we put too much on you." I didn't say anything. I just kept driving. It wasn't an apology. I'm not sure it was even the beginning of one, but it was something honest, and honest is rarer in my family than it should be. So I filed it in the same folder where I keep the things that are small but real. My house is still mine. The title is still in my name. The mortgage renews in 2 years, and when it does, I'll probably renegotiate the terms. My financial planner has suggested I look at whether the HELOC capacity could serve me rather than anyone else. And I think she's right. I still work in insolvency. I still see people every week who borrowed against things they couldn't afford to lose, who signed things they didn't fully read, who trusted people they loved more than they trusted the numbers. I never tell them what to feel about it. I just show them what the paper says. The paper doesn't lie. The people do. But sometimes, not always, not easily, they find their way back towards something truer. I didn't write a debt in my ledger that November. I wrote a boundary. And for the first time in a long time, when I looked at what I actually had and what I actually owed, the numbers finally made sense. I think about the drive back from Thunder Bay a lot. My mother asleep in the passenger seat, the highway dark, the heater running. She said 4 words. I know we overdid it. And then she was quiet again. That was it. No full accounting. No moment where everything got named and sorted. Just 4 words in the dark and me keeping my eyes on the road. For a long time, I thought that was the part I was supposed to be angry about. The smallness of it. But I've come to think it was actually the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. And honesty, even when it arrives quietly and incomplete, is still worth something. What I learned from all of this didn't come from the confrontation. It came from the 11 days before it. The part nobody sees. The part where I sat at my kitchen table at midnight reading bank statements and asking myself what I actually knew versus what I had assumed. That discipline, the willingness to slow down and look clearly at something that hurt, instead of reacting to the first version of the story, that's what changed the outcome. Not cleverness, not anger, just the decision to understand the situation fully before I moved inside it. Owen is paying his proposal down. He has 3 more years on it. I don't know if he's learned anything from this, and I've made a certain peace with not knowing. What I do know is that the path I pointed him toward, a consumer proposal, a licensed trustee, a structured process, was genuinely the most helpful thing I could have offered him. More helpful than $60,000 would have been. Money without structure would have bought him maybe 18 months. The process gave him a way through. Sometimes the most decent thing you can do for someone is refuse to absorb the consequences of their choices, and instead show them what the actual options look like. That distinction between rescuing someone and helping them took me a long time to understand. I used to think they were the same thing. In my family, they were always presented as the same thing. But rescuing someone, the way my parents wanted me to rescue Owen, would have required me to take on risk I hadn't created, to compromise an asset I had built through years of careful decisions, and to participate in a story that wasn't true. That's not love. That's a transaction dressed up as love, and the difference matters. I kept the voice memo. I haven't listened to it since. I don't need to. What I needed was for the people in that room to know it existed. To feel, just once, what it is like to have the terms of a conversation made visible. That's all it was, not a weapon, an equalizer. My house is still mine, my ledger still balances, and when I open the door in November mornings and smell the cold air coming in off the street, I feel something I didn't used to feel in my own home, like I actually live there, like it's actually mine. That feeling, I've decided, is what I was protecting all along. Not the equity, not the title. The right to stand somewhere and know, without any doubt, that you earned it.